October 4th, 1941, 14:30 hours, a muddy track near Mtsensk, sector of Panzer Group 2. Major Hans von Kleist, an engineer seconded from the Heereswaffenamt, rubs his eyes. The rain is a cold grey sheet, turning the Russian earth into a viscous soup that clings to his staff car's wheels. They are stopped, again. The offensive, the great push to Moscow, has drowned in this mud. The term Rasputitsa, the time without roads, is no longer a geographical curiosity. It is a tactical reality. Von Kleist is not a frontline soldier, not truly. He is a man of calipers and blueprints, sent to observe and report on the performance of German armor. His reports thus far have been glowing. The Panzer III and Eifel, miracles of engineering, optics and crew comfort. They had sliced through Poland and France. Here they die. A motorcycle messenger caked in mud that makes him monolithic. Hans von Kleist, a flimsy report. A single T-34, a name he is just beginning to learn and dread, has held up the 4th Panzer Division's advance for hours. Not a battalion, not a company, a single tank. He had seen the reports before, easy to dismiss in Berlin, harder to ignore when you can smell the smoke. He looks past the messenger to the ridgeline. 2 black plumes, thick and oily, stain the sky, a Panzer III and a Panzer IV. He can see their silhouettes, angled wrong, tracks broken. The crews, they had not made it. His job is to understand the metal, but he cannot ignore the men. Von Kleist is a man of data. The Panzer III, Ausf H, carries a 50mm KWK 38 L42 cannon. It fires a PZGR-39 armor-piercing shell at 685 meters per second. At 500 meters, it should penetrate 51 millimeters of flat armor. These are the facts. The Soviet T-34, according to preliminary intelligence, supposedly has only 45 millimeters of armor. Yet the field reports tell a different story. Rounds deflect. No penetration, bouncing off like peas. The math does not add up. The war of theory is losing to the war of survival. He steps out of the car, his boots sinking instantly into the cold brown muck. The sound of the T-34's 76 2mm gun is a deep, resonant thump, utterly different from the sharp crack of the German 50mm. It is the sound of authority. His aide points. "Major, it's still there. They say it's out of ammunition, or perhaps fuel, but the crew, they just wait." Von Kleist begins the long walk toward the front line. He needs to see this thing. He needs to touch the steel that is breaking the spine of the Wehrmacht. He carries his leather satchel, not with maps, but with measuring tools. He is no longer an observer. He is an investigator at a crime scene, and the victim is German engineering. He passes the crews of a supply column, their faces grey with fatigue. They look at him without hope. They know their panzers are suddenly no longer the best. The myth is breaking. Von Kleist grips the strap of his satchel. The problem isn't the mud, or the winter, or even the sheer number of Soviet soldiers. The problem is an object, a single piece of machinery that shouldn't exist. A machine that is, by all German standards, impossible. He must get to it. He must understand why his perfect theories are failing in the face of this crude iron reality. The mystery is no longer on paper. It is sitting on a hilltop near Mtsensk, waiting. The T-34 is captured 2 days later, its crew having finally abandoned it in the night. It is not destroyed. It is simply, maddeningly, out of fuel. Major von Kleist finds it guarded by a platoon of infantrymen who stare at it as if it were a dragon slain. It is ugly. Not ugly in the way of a weapon, but ugly in the way of a tool made in a hurry. The welds are rough, jagged, and splattered. The armor plates are unfinished, covered in mill scale. There are gaps between the panels a man could slide a pencil into. It looks less like a product of an industrial superpower and more like something hammered together in a blacksmith's shop. Von Kleist walks around it, his boots crunching on the frosted mud. He runs a gloved hand over the glacis plate. It is a single, unbroken slab of steel, and it is sloped, drastically sloped, at 60 degrees. He removes his glove and places his bare hand on the metal. It is freezing, but he feels a strange energy in it. He is a man who appreciates the fine tolerances of a Maybach engine, the Zeiss optics of a gun sight. This is an insult. It is brutalism in steel. A young Panzer lieutenant, his face pale and strained, approaches him. "Major, this is the one." "How many did you lose?" Von Kleist asks, his voice quiet, still staring at the armor. "3, sir. 2 Panzer IIIs and a IV. We hit this thing perhaps 30 times. The 37mm, it's a joke. We call it the Hirasan-Klopfgerät, the army door knocker. It just makes them angry. The 50-meter. It gouged the paint, but it did not go through." The lieutenant kicks the massive road wheel. "And this, look at it, this suspension. It's American, I think. Christie, simple, wide tracks. It doesn't sink in the mud. We sink it. It floats." Von Kleist pulls out a notepad and a steel tape measure. He feels a growing dread, a cold knot in his stomach that has nothing to do with the Russian winter. He's not looking at a tank. He is looking at a revolution. The Germans had designed their tanks for a civilized war, a war of movement on European roads. The Soviets had designed a tank for this, for a war of mud, snow, and vast empty distances. He climbs onto the engine deck. The grating is simple. He can smell the faint, acrid tang of diesel, not gasoline. Diesel, less flammable, more range. "Did you look inside, Lieutenant?" "Yes, sir, it's primitive. No radio for the tank commander. The optics are terrible. The crew compartment is cramped. They say the gearbox is so bad the driver needs a hammer to shift gears. And the ammunition is just stored on the floor. It's a death trap." Von Kleist nods, but he is no longer listening. The lieutenant sees flaws. Von Kleist sees choices. The Soviets had sacrificed everything: crew comfort, finish, optics, radios, for 3 things: firepower, armor, mobility, and they had achieved all 3 in a single, terrifying package. He looks at the lieutenant's face, seeking confirmation of his own genius. The lieutenant sees a crude box. Von Kleist sees the future. What he didn't know was that this singular, ugly machine and the report he was about to write would change the design of every tank that came after it. Before Operation Barbarossa, the German Army Weapons Agency, the Heereswaffenamt, operated on a bedrock of unshakable confidence. Their intelligence on Soviet armor was thorough, meticulous, and completely wrong. The Wehrmacht was prepared for the T-26 and the BT series tanks. The T-26, a light infantry tank based on a 1920s British design, was vulnerable to virtually every anti-tank weapon in the German arsenal. The BT-7, a fast tank, was fast and agile but thinly armored. German doctrine was built around defeating these machines. The standard German 3.7mm PaK-36 anti-tank gun was considered more than sufficient. Reports from the field, beginning as early as July 1941, were summarily dismissed. A report from the 16th Panzer Division, dated July 11, 1941, reads, "New type of Russian medium tank encountered. Fired upon by battery of Pak-36 at 200 mm range. No effect. Rounds were observed to ricochet, causing no damage. Tank then overran the battery. Request heavier caliber." The response from Berlin was one of disbelief. This was attributed to crew panic, poor positioning, or defective ammunition. The concept of a mass-produced medium tank that was immune to standard anti-tank fire was considered an impossibility. The problem was one of philosophy. German engineering was an exercise in optimization and specialization. The Panzer III was designed to fight other tanks. The Panzer IV was designed to support infantry with a short-barreled 7.5 cm howitzer. They were complex, filled with high-quality components, and required significant man-hours to produce. The Soviet Union, in contrast, was viewed as a technically backward state, incapable of such innovation. The assumption was that they would rely on mass, not quality. Then came the data from Mtsensk and from the analysis of the first captured T-34s. The numbers were cold and brutal. The T-34-76 model 1941. Weight 26, 5 tons. Engine Kharkiv V234, a 12-cylinder diesel engine, 500 horsepower. Speed 53 km/h on road. Armor 45 mm, sloped at 60 degrees. This final specification was the killer. An armor plate sloped at 60 degrees provides a line-of-sight thickness equivalent to a flat plate, twice as thick. The T-34's 45 mm glacis had the effective resistance of 90 mm of vertical armor. The German 50 mm L-42 gun on the Panzer III could not penetrate 90 mm of armor at any range. Not at 1,000 meters, not at 10 meters, not point blank. A classified Heereswaffenamt memo from late November 1941 summarized the crisis. The tactical and technical superiority hitherto enjoyed by our tank forces has been lost. The T-34 is superior in firepower, armor, and mobility. Our current designs, the P's KPFW, A3 and IV, are, in their present form, obsolete. Urgent remedial action is required. We have been fundamentally surpassed not by a superior technology, but by a superior philosophy. The problem was not just a new tank. It was that the entire foundation of German armored warfare had been proven false. Statistics are sterile. 90 mm of effective armor is a number, a 76. 2-meter L11 cannon is a specification, but for the men of Panzer Regiment 25, these numbers translated into a new visceral kind of terror. The Panzer Lied, their marching song, spoke of roaring engines and laughing in the face of death. By October 1941, the laughter had stopped. A tanker's after-action report, filed by a Lieutenant Franz Stigler, captures the human consequence. We engaged the T-34 at 800 meters. Our first shot a direct hit. It bounced. We closed to 600 meters. Another hit. It bounced. He turned his turret. We knew then that we were already gone. We were a crew of 5. Only 2 of us escaped the fire. The human cost was measured in these small, claustrophobic steel boxes. The German Panzers, with their gasoline engines, had a terrifying tendency to ignite when penetrated. The crews called it brewing up. The violence of the impact was one thing, the fire was another. It created a psychological trauma that spread faster than any field report. This Panzer Schreck, or tank terror, was new. For the first time, the hunter had become the hunted. The Panzers, once knights of the steppe, were reduced to brittle-shelled targets, forced to rely on flanking maneuvers, air support, or the 80 mm anti-aircraft guns pulled from their sky-watching duties. The sense of impossibility was pervasive. The T-34 was not just a better tank, it was a tank that shouldn't exist. It defied the laws of production. How could a nation the Germans viewed as primitive, a nation that had just endured Stalin's brutal purges, produce such a weapon in such numbers? It was simple, crude, and effective. The Germans, in contrast, were building tanks like Swiss watches. A single Panzer IV required intricate gearing, complex suspension, and thousands of skilled man-hours. The T-34 looked like it was welded by farmers, and it was, and there were thousands of them. The German soldier, pragmatic and cynical, summed it up best. They were facing an enemy who had thrown away the instruction manual. In Berlin, procurement officers and engineers, men of impeccable credentials, studied the reports. Their conclusion was a defense mechanism. It couldn't be done. The T-34 must be a fluke, a limited-run wonder weapon that the Soviets could not possibly mass-produce. They were wrong. It was the most produced tank of the war. The experts had agreed a tank could not have speed, armor, and a big gun. You could pick two. The Soviets had picked three, and they had paid for it in a currency the Germans no longer understood: simplicity. The German soldier was learning the difference between engineering theory and battlefield reality. If this clash of technology and terror fascinates you, stay with us. The next chapter of wartime innovation is just as surprising. The hero of this story is not a man in a black uniform. He is not a German general or a procurement officer. The hero is Mikhail Ilyich Koshkin, and he is already dead. Koshkin was a brilliant, stubborn, and ultimately tragic figure. Born in 1898, he was not a product of the aristocracy. He was a Bolshevik, a true believer, a man who had studied engineering not in the polished halls of Berlin, but in the pragmatic, brutalist schools of the new Soviet state. He was a confectioner by trade who became a tank designer. This is the key to understanding the T-34. It was not designed by men who loved tanks. It was designed by men who needed a tool to save the nation. In the late 1930s, Koshkin was assigned to the Kharkiv locomotive factory, known as Factory Number 183. He was tasked with designing the replacement for the BT series tanks. The context of his work was one of extreme paranoia and danger. Stalin's Great Purge was gutting the Red Army Officer Corps and the engineering bureaus. To fail was not just to be fired, it was to be declared an enemy of the people and executed. His predecessor at the factory had been arrested. Koshkin worked quite literally with a gun to his head. His instructions from the main military revolutionary council, headed by the conservative Marshal Kulik, were to design the A-20. This was to be a complex convertible tank, capable of running on both tracks for battle and wheels for roads. It was a typically confused, committee-driven design. Koshkin and his small team, working in secret, designed a second prototype alongside it, the A-32. It was radical. It abandoned the complex wheel-track system, using the weight savings to add thicker armor and a more powerful 76 2mm gun. It was track only. It was simple. This was Koshkin's quiet, personal insurgency. He believed the future of warfare was not in complex hybrid machines, but in a universal tank, a tank that could do everything. He built the A-32 on his own initiative, risking his life on the belief that his design was better. He was a pragmatist, shaped by the lessons of the Spanish Civil War, which had proven that tanks needed to be cannon-proof and that diesel engines were safer than gasoline. He was creating a machine not for a parade, but for a war of survival. The idea was heresy. Marshal Kulik and the other cavalry-minded generals loathed the A-32. It was heavy. It was ugly. It lacked the elegance of the wheeled BT tanks. In a tense meeting in Moscow in 1939, Koshkin presented his bastard prototype. "It's a tractor, not a tank," one general scoffed. "The suspension will fail. The engine is untested. We need a fast tank, not this. This fortress." The resistance was enormous. The military establishment wanted to build what they knew. Koshkin was proposing a leap into the unknown. To settle the debate, Koshkin made an impossibly bold proposal. He would conduct a field test, a real test. He would drive two prototypes, by then designated the T-34, from his factory in Kharkov, Ukraine, to Moscow for Stalin's personal inspection. And he would do it in the dead of winter. It was a 500-mile round trip over frozen rivers, through deep snow and on roads that did not exist. It was an act of supreme confidence or supreme desperation. The journey began in March 1940. It was a brutal odyssey. The tanks, driven by Koshkin himself and his factory team, smashed through forests, crossed ice-covered rivers, and endured 40-degree temperatures. They were disguised, traveling secretly. Breakdowns were constant. The clutches burned out, the transmissions groaned, but the V2 diesel engine never faltered and the wide tracks held the snow. Koshkin, driving in the open hatch, contracted pneumonia. He was freezing, sick, but absolutely determined. When the two mud-caked, exhausted prototypes rumbled onto the grounds of the Kremlin, the effect was immediate. Stalin, a pragmatist himself, saw what his generals had missed. He saw a war winner. He walked around the machine, smoking his pipe, and gave his approval. "This machine," he reportedly said, "will be our workhorse." Koshkin's gamble had paid off. The T-34 was approved for mass production. Koshkin, however, would not live to see it. He succumbed to complications from the pneumonia he contracted on the drive. He died in September 1940, having given his life to prove his idea. His act of defiance gave the Red Army the one tool it needed to survive the invasion that was to come. Back in the mud of Mtsensk, October 1941, Major Hans von Kleist has a mission. His captured T-34, a model 1941, has been towed by 3 SED KFZ-9 half-tracks to a quiet sector behind the lines. The Rasputitsa has paused the offensive, and for a few days the engineers own the war. Von Kleist is not alone. He has summoned a Hauptmann, captain, from a nearby PaK-38 anti-tank battalion, and after pulling rank and citing orders from Guderian's own staff, an 80mm flak battery, the artillerymen are confused and annoyed, dragged from their air defense positions to shoot at a dead tank. The setting is a desolate open field. The sky is a low, oppressive grey. The T-34 sits 500 meters away, its profile low and menacing even in death. "Right," von Kleist says, his voice flat. "Hauptmann, your PaK-38, standard armor piercing, aim for the glacis." The 50mm gun, the pride of the new Panzer IIIs, is maneuvered into position. The crew works efficiently. Fire. The crack of the gun echoes across the field. The tracer round speeds toward the target and, zing! It ricochets, screaming off into the grey sky. A small, bright gouge is visible on the armor plate. Nothing more. Move to 200 meters, von Kleist orders. The gun crew, sweating despite the cold, hauls the gun forward. Fire! Again, the sound. Clang. A solid hit. Von Kleist and the Hauptmann look through their binoculars. The shell has bit the armor. It has stuck, but it has not gone through. The Hauptmann swears quietly. That is impossible, Major. We are certified to penetrate 60 millimeters at this range. Your certification, von Kleist replies, assumes a 90-degree impact. This is not 90 degrees. This is geometry. Now, bring up the 37mm. The Hauptmann looks at him, insulted. The Pak-36? Sir, that is a waste of ammunition. Do it, von Kleist says. I want the report to be complete. The small door knocker is rolled out. It fires. Ping, ping, ping. The rounds, as one tanker had said, just make it angry. They barely even chip the paint. The artillerymen laugh. It is a gallows humor. Von Kleist turns to the flak battery commander. Your turn. 88 meters, high velocity. Aim for the hull. The Flak 18 is a massive, complex weapon. Its crew is a polished team. They traverse the long barrel, depressing it until it is pointing almost horizontally. It is an anti-aircraft gun, never intended for this. Fire! The sound is not a crack. It is a physical explosion. The shockwave rips across the field, flattening the damp grass. The shell, traveling at over 820 meters per second, is almost instantaneous. Whump! The T-34 jumps. It rocks back on its suspension as if hit by a giant's fist. A bright flash, and then a perfectly round 88mm hole appears in the upper hull. A second later, a corresponding hole appears on the other side. The shell has passed clean through the tank, through both sides of the armor, and buried itself 50 feet into the field behind it. There is a long, reverent silence. The artillerymen stare. The Hauptmann lowers his binoculars, his face white. Von Kleist walks over to the flak commander. So, that is the only thing we have that can kill it. An anti-aircraft gun. The commander nods. And Major, he adds, we only have a few of those. If stories like this, where a single test can change the course of a war, fascinate you, stay with us. The next chapter of this wartime innovation is not what you expect. Berlin, December 6, 1941. The first snows are falling on the city, a pale imitation of the blizzard now burying Army Group Center outside Moscow. Major Hans von Kleist stands at attention in a heated conference room at the Heereswaffenamt. His report, Technical Analysis of Soviet T-34, is on the polished oak table, along with his calipers, armor angle diagrams, and a singed 50mm shell casing he'd recovered from the Mtsensk test. His audience is a committee of senior procurement officers and engineers. They are skeptical. They are comfortable. Major, begins General Major Oswald, a man who had built his career on artillery logistics, your report is dramatic. You claim our entire Panzer force is obsolete. You claim our 50mm gun, a fine piece of Krupp steel, is ineffective. These are extraordinary claims. General Major, von Kleist says, his voice steady, they are not claims. They are observations. I have here the data. The T-34's 45mm glacis plate, sloped at 60 degrees, offers 90mm of effective armor. Our Pak-38, as designed, cannot defeat this, not even at close range. Only the 88mm flak gun proved effective. A civilian engineer from Henschel interrupts, but Major, the quality. The reports all state the vehicle is crude, the welding is appalling, the crew ergonomics are non-existent. Surely this is not a superior design, it is a peasant's weapon. This is the moment. Von Kleist steps forward. That, he says, is precisely why it is superior. We are building tanks for a short war. The Soviets are building tanks for this war. We have designed for crew comfort. They have designed for a 500 horsepower diesel engine. We have designed for precision optics. They have designed for a 76mm gun that can destroy any of our Panzers at a kilometer. They have sacrificed everything that does not contribute to armor, mobility or firepower. And the result is on the gates of Moscow, and we are not. The tension is thick. This is not just an engineering debate, it is a cultural and philosophical one. What you are suggesting, Major, the General says, is that we abandon German quality. No, sir, von Kleist replies, his voice rising in passion. I am suggesting we respect the enemy's philosophy. We cannot build this tank. We do not have the V2 engine. Our steel alloys are different. We cannot weld like this, but we must answer it. We need sloped armor. We need a long barrel, high-velocity gun. We need wider tracks. If we continue to build the Panzer III and IV, we will lose this war next summer. The T-34 is not a tank. It is a wake-up call. The room is silent. The committee members look at each other. They see a fanatical young officer, but they also see the data. They see the undeniable math. The meeting ends without a conclusion, but von Kleist's report, combined with identical, desperate pleas from Guderian at the front, has planted a seed of panic. The German Panzer Commission is assembled. The Panzer Commission is not a meeting. It is an emergency delegation. In late November 1941, Germany's top tank designers, Ferdinand Porsche, Oskar Henschel and engineers from MAN and Daimler-Benz, are flown to the Eastern Front to Guderian's 2nd Panzer Army headquarters. This is the real test. Not a test of a gun, but a test of a philosophy. Major von Kleist is there, acting as a technical liaison. The designers, men accustomed to drawing boards and clean factories, are brought to a depot filled with captured T-34s. The contrast is almost comical. The German engineers, in their long leather coats and felt hats, walk around the snow-covered T-34s. They are horrified. They poke at the rough welds. They tap the armor with hammers. They open the hatches and recoil at the Spartan oil-stained interior. Dr. Porsche is reportedly aghast at the simplicity of the Christie suspension, calling it antiquated. But Guderian, his face lined with fatigue, sets them straight. Your antiquated tank, Doctor, is running. My panzers are frozen solid. Your theories do not matter. That thing works. The Commission's findings are a full-throated confirmation of von Kleist's report. The proof is in the field. The German tanks are over-engineered. Their narrow tracks clog with mud and ice, then freeze, immobilizing entire divisions. Their gasoline engines are difficult to start in the 40-degree cold. Their armor is vertical, offering no ballistic advantage. The T-34, with its wide tracks, diesel engine and sloped armor, is built for this environment. The real test is the German response. The first impulse is the most telling. We must copy it, one engineer says. A direct one-to-one copy. But they cannot. A preliminary analysis shows it is impossible. German industry cannot mass-produce the V2 diesel engine. They cannot cast the massive turret ring. They cannot weld high-hardness steel in the same crude, fast way. The German philosophy is too deeply ingrained. The commission returns to Berlin. The finding is clear: copying is impossible. The solution must be a German answer to the T-34. The specifications are laid down for a new Mittlerer Panzer. It must have sloped armor, like the T-34. A powerful long-barrel gun to kill the T-34, and superior mobility. The result of this panic, this direct response to the T-34 shock, will be the Panzer IV, the Panther. It is not a copy, it is an answer, and in its own way, it is a testament to the T-34's brutal genius. The Germans have silently, officially, admitted their own tanks are second best. Thus, the T-34 shock of 1941 was not a temporary setback. It was a permanent shift in the technological landscape of the war. The immediate consequence was that the Wehrmacht's 1941 offensive bled to death outside Moscow. The Panzers, which had seemed invincible, were revealed as critically flawed. This forced a complete and panicked reorganization of German tank design and production. The Panther and the Tiger, the two most famous German tanks of the war, were the direct result. They were born from the terror inspired by the T-34. But this response reveals the deeper legacy. The Germans, in answering the T-34, created magnificent, complex, and lethally effective tanks. The Panther was, on a one-to-one basis, superior to the T-34-76. The Tiger was a mobile fortress, but they were also German to a fault, over-engineered, expensive, and difficult to maintain. Germany built 347 Tiger Is. They built just under 6 0-0 Panthers. The Soviet Union, in the same period, built over 84 0-0 T-34s. The T-34's legacy is one of good enough. It was a philosophy of quantity has a quality all its own. The Soviets could afford to lose 10 T-34s to destroy one Tiger, because they had 11. The design was continuously improved, but its core simplicity was never broken. The T-34-85, with its bigger gun and three-man turret, arrived in 1944 to answer the Tiger and Panther. It was still the same rough, reliable, mass-producible machine. It was the tool that won the war on the Eastern Front. Mikhail Koshkin, the man who gave his life for the T-34, was posthumously awarded the Stalin Prize. His tank, however, was his true monument. It became the defining weapon of the Red Army and the ancestor of the modern main battle tank. After the war, T-34s served in dozens of armies around the world, from the Korean War to conflicts in the Middle East and Africa. Its simple, robust design made it the AK-47 of tanks. As for Major von Kleist, our fictional lens, he and his report, were absorbed by the bureaucracy. His work was done, his warning heeded. The engineers he horrified went on to build their beautiful, fatal tanks, and the T-34 just kept coming. The T-34 was more than a tank. It was a philosophy, one that echoes in every engineering bay and design lab today. It represents the eternal conflict between perfection and pragmatism. The German designers built cathedrals of steel, intricate and beautiful and fragile. The Soviets built hammers. The war, it turned out, needed hammers. This is the lesson of robust design versus optimized design. The optimized design is perfect until the first grain of sand or first drop of mud enters the system. The robust design, ugly and imperfect, keeps working. This dynamic is not confined to military history. We see it today. We see it in the philosophical split between complex, exquisite software and simple, unbreakable code. We see it in disaster response, where a simple, diesel-powered water pump is infinitely more valuable than a high-tech purification system that requires a stable power grid. We see it in space exploration, where the build, fly, test, fail, repeat mentality of new rocket companies challenges the slow, perfect, committee-driven design of older agencies. The T-34's DNA is in every good-enough solution that wins. The T-34s that once roared across the steppes still stand today, silent witnesses in museums from Kubinka to Kentucky. They are monuments to a radical idea that simplicity is its own form of genius. They are rough, unrefined, and ugly, and they are perhaps the most important single weapon of the 20th century. The German Panzers were brilliant, but the T-34 was decisive. It proved that the most powerful weapon is not always the most advanced, but the one that is there. Every great idea begins as an act of defiance against impossibility. What impossible, simple ideas do you think could change the world?